What happens when Disneyland cast members break character? Story 1. A face performer broke character for my husband and me at a Disney park about 2 months after our infant son passed away. He was our first child, and our entire nursery was themed after Neverland and Peter Pan. We had always wanted to take him to Disney and have him meet Peter, but he couldn't go. I got a memorial tattoo of his hospital ink handprint, and we took it with us to Disney to get a picture with Peter Pan. We were alone with Peter and his handler when I tearfully explained the situation and asked if he could pose with my arm. Peter took lots of photos with my tattoo and us, and afterward he gave me a big hug and told me that he was proud of me, that God blessed us, and that he was so sorry for our loss. It was an amazing and emotional experience, and I'll never forget that Peter Pan was proud of me for finding the strength to keep living. It honestly meant the world to me. I'm so glad he broke character. I'll always treasure those photos and that memory. Story 2. My family went to Disney World a few times when I was a kid. My dad was cruel, both physically and verbally. We eventually left him when I was in 5th grade. He was especially awful on vacations, always being miserable and grumpy. One Valentine's Day, my mom, dad, older sister, and I were at one of the parks. I don't remember which one. All of the characters had big red hearts on a string around their necks. My sister was about in 3rd grade at the time, and I was in 1st grade. We had just gotten ice cream and were excitedly looking around for our favorite characters. My sister spotted Eeyore, her all-time favorite character, and turned around. My dad, who wasn't paying attention, ran right into her, knocking over her ice cream cone and getting it on his shirt. He immediately flew off the handle and hit her in the side of the face, knocking off her glasses and making her drop her ice cream cone. She started crying, and my mom started yelling at my dad, who defended his actions by saying that she should have watched where she was going. Then suddenly, Eeyore came over and hugged my sister. She was so shocked that she stopped crying and started beaming with happiness. Eeyore kept hugging her while my mom took pictures. Finally, Eeyore let go of my sister and pointed to his paper heart. Then he hugged her again. My mom has a picture somewhere in her basement of my sister and me standing with Eeyore. My sister is beaming, but it's clear that she's also been crying. I think about that Eeyore to this day. I wonder what he was thinking. It was the early 1990s, and people were still largely expected to mind their own business when it came to such things. Reading these other comments makes me realize that he may not have been able to do anything else anyway, but I appreciate his gesture nonetheless. Thanks, Eeyore. Eeyore's heart is pure gold, while that scumbag dad is heartless. I hope the new Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey version gives him a good scare. Story 3. My mom used to be a costumed character at Disneyland for a couple of years. She was dedicated to staying in character, but there was one instance when she had to break character. 2 teenagers confronted her while she was playing Piglet and started being physically aggressive. Initially, she tried to defend herself, but at one point she managed to knock one of the boys to the ground and pin him down. Considering my mom is only 4'10" and was wearing around 50 pounds of costume, I find that pretty impressive. The other kid continued to charge her, and I think my mom may have let out a yelp or cry, prompting the pin boy to exclaim, "Oh shoot, it's a chick!" It was quite a surprise, as most of the shorter characters are portrayed by women due to their height. Fellow cast members came to her rescue, and the troublesome teenagers were banned from the park. However, my mom did get into trouble because she had to break character. As far as I can recall, she was suspended for a couple of days. Story 4. I have 3 cousins who have been Disney princesses. All 2 of them still are. About a year ago, my grandparents decided to visit one of my cousins at Disneyland Tokyo. My grandpa had, and still has, moderately advanced Alzheimer's, but he is generally easy to handle. Anyway, he somehow got separated from my grandma and started to panic a little, looking for anyone who knew. As it turned out, the first person he recognized was my cousin in full Cinderella regalia. In Tokyo, the characters are allowed to come out and walk around the park because the Japanese are very respectful. He started to talk to my cousin, calling her by her real name and asking her directly where his wife and her parents were. He started to get quite angry and frustrated when she couldn't give him a straight answer. She tried her best to stay in character, but her handlers quickly whisked her away. He was reunited with the rest of the group soon after, but it was quite a scene. Yes, it was unfortunate. Disney could, or should, be more lenient in these situations, My extended family just tries to remember it as a ridiculous chain of events and not as a traumatic one. In the end, it turned out relatively okay. Alzheimer's is a terrible disease, and I guess we think that it's better to include my grandpa in family events and risk these kinds of happenings than to isolate him in a room somewhere where he would be completely, quote unquote, safe. I wasn't actually there, so I'm sure I'm missing some details. Story 5. I'm not a character, but a security guard. At Disney, security has its own character. We're here to look intimidating, and sometimes we can be. We have a ton of hidden passageways and some not so inviting cells we might use if the situation calls for it. So one day, there was a domestic incident in the park. The police took the dad away, and from that moment, I was assigned to escort the mom and her young son back to their hotel room. They were genuinely concerned that the dad might find his way back onto the property. They were very, very frightened. I walked alongside them and I overheard the mother speaking softly to her son. "You see, your mama is strong and we'll be fine, the two of us. We're going to have a fantastic trip. See that lady?" She motioned toward me. "See, she's a lady too, and look how tough she is. I'm willing to bet they assigned us the toughest guard they got." Later, they called me again when they were ready to head back to the parks, still afraid that the dad might return. I walked with them, and the little boy looked up at me, saying, "Miss, I'm scared. Are you sure we'll be okay?" I stopped, knelt down to his level, and said, "You're going to be just fine. Your mommy is really tough, and she was right. I'm tough too. What's even better, my best friend, Mickey Mouse, made sure to inform all the strongest, toughest people in the park to look out for you today. He added some extra magic to make sure both of you have a fantastic day. So don't worry, just have fun." His face lit up and he gave me a hug. It was his first time and I almost teared up on the job. That's actually sweet. With the Mickey Mouse security on his side, this boy has nothing to fear. Story 6. Over a decade ago, my friend was a face character at Disneyland and told me about her friend who was pals with Goofy, which is what they say to people when out of costume to preserve the magic instead of outright saying you're the character. One day, Goofy's shift ended, and he was walking to the back area to cool off when a very angry mom started yelling at him because he snubbed her son. In reality, he couldn't see them as he was turning to leave. The lady then called him a racist, saying that Goofy was ignoring them because they were black. Goofy turned around to greet the child and signed his autograph book. Then he turned to the mom, slipped up his sleeve, and quickly pointed at his own black skin underneath before walking away. Story 7. I've got a story about someone who used to perform as a mascot at Disneyland. A couple of years ago, he had to dress up as Nick from Zootopia for his shift. Now, the unique thing about this costume is the massive metal spring inside the tail, which creates the illusion that it can move on its own. One day, while he was on his rounds with his partner Judy, they encountered a bit of a troublemaker, an 11-year-old boy who was being a bit rough pulling on Nick's tail. It's important to note that this tail is quite heavy, weighing around 40 pounds, and securely attached to his back. With no proper field of vision except for the tunnel vision they get, no option to break character, and no security nearby to intervene, he was in a bit of a pickle. Fortunately for Nick, the father of the troublemaker told his son to stop and apologize. The apology came with a grumpy tone that made it seem like he didn't really care. Following this apology, a young girl behind the troublemaker called out, "Hey Nick," without missing a beat. Nick did a complete 180, attempting to hit the troublemaker with his tail. He made contact and smacked the kid with a solid thud, knocking him on his backside. As he focused on the little girl, his mind raced, thinking he might get fired for his little stunt. But fortunately, the dad came to the rescue, laughing at the kid's misfortune and saying something like, "You know you deserve that, right?" He had more stories about the foolish things they encountered, but they make it abundantly clear at work. You do not break character under any circumstances. Story 8. I wasn't a character, but a cast member at Disneyland one time. I was walking from backstage into the park, pushing a handcart with two long supports sticking out from the end. As I was going through an S-shaped transition, I hit Winnie the Pooh square in the leg with one of the supports. Hearing Winnie the Pooh say "freak" was pretty darn funny. Another time, I saw Darth Vader not cutting down younglings, which was unprofessional as hell. The effort that Disney puts into it just isn't the same anymore. It's like they're sellouts now. My cousin also used to work at Disneyland when I was a kid. She mostly played Pooh Bear. She would never say out loud, "Hi, cousin," but she would get very animated and jump around to give us hugs. Occasionally, she would still say things like, "I have a rumbly in my tummy." I thought I was the coolest kid because I knew Pooh Bear. Yeah, you're the boss if the honey lover was your homie. If you're amazed by these stories about Disney characters breaking the magic spell, then give this video a like and subscribe to my channel. Story 9. I have a close friend who worked as Woody at Disneyland for a while. He told me that one time a float went up in flames during a show and the cast members had to play it off completely in character. They danced around the float and quickly got it backstage to deal with the problem. He played it off so well that no one seemed to notice or there was any panic. He also said that he had never seen anyone break character because everyone was very well trained, and there were always at least 6 cameras watching them at all times. I once offered an unopened water bottle to an employee on a day where it was nearly 100 degrees Fahrenheit, but he refused it. He said that if anyone at Disney saw him accept it, he would be fired. Employees are not allowed to take anything from guests. He also mentioned that the cameras were constantly watching both crew and patrons. I texted my friend to confirm, and he gave me another story to share. One time, an acrobat fell off a float, face planted into the ground, and knocked herself out. The other cast members surrounded her in a circle and danced in sync as they dragged her body away. They played it off so well that apparently no one noticed. Story 10. Back in the day, I worked at the Walt Disney World Character Department at Magic Kingdom. I can't recall ever breaking character, but I do have memories of my time working at the restaurant at the Contemporary, especially during dinners. One special experience stands out when we had a Make-A-Wish guest, a very awesome kid. It was truly heartwarming, even though the reason for their visit was quite emotional. Our lead allowed us to spend some quality time with the kid in our costumes, and we all had a blast playing, running around, and having fun together. Trust me, you couldn't do what we've done in parks. It would have turned into a kid riot. There were no consequences, just the hope that we could bring a smile to that young one's face. And here's a bonus fact. During the Electric Light Parade, the Goofy costume was worn by a float driver. Since the driver was seated, there were no pants with that costume, just the glittery top, head, and gloves. Story 11. Disneyland used to feature a Tarzan character, but he's nowhere to be seen these days. With the expectation that characters pose for photos and selfies, and given Tarzan's attire, a mere loincloth, women kept getting overly hands-on, often grabbing the actor's rear when they got too close. Consequently, the park decided to retire that character. However, after confirming the inappropriate behavior, there have been recent Tarzan sightings. It seems Disney put the character on pause and revamped his loincloth costume into something more similar to shorts with a jungle vine sash. It appears that some women are still a bit grabby, but the costume department tried to make it a little less inviting. Man, it's so cringy to see people acting like apes, stealing native booty like it's the colonial era. Story 12. I chaperoned a gentleman with special needs to Disneyland as part of a group tour. When our group met the characters, they were all absolutely incredible with our people. Minnie flirted with my friend I took, Merida flirted with me, but the best of all was Cruella de Vil. Normally she insults whoever she takes pictures with, but with us, she managed to stay in character without saying anything actually mean. She said to one guy with a cane, "Ah, I like your cane. You can use it to shoo away the little ones." Story 13. As an ex-cast member at Disneyland, I had to work the parade route from time to time, making sure kids don't run out in front of the floats and such. Friends of characters would often be playful with cast members, CMs, along the parade route, winking and making silly faces. One day, Baloo came up to me mid-dance and bowed to me, wearing a crown hat thing with a star on top. Baloo probably wasn't aware of how tall that actually made them, because they managed to smack me right in the mouth with that star. Gave me a cut and a fat lip. I'm fairly certain I heard Baloo audibly gasp when they stood upright again and put their paws to their mouth. They immediately stopped dancing and just stared at me. They tried to grab my hands and pull me to them, but their handler came and ushered them along. Oops. Story 14. On a Disney cruise, I met a guy who looked exactly like Peter Pan. When we asked him if he was Peter Pan, he said, "Nah, Peter Pan has brown eyes," or something like that. The next day, we went to get a picture with Peter Pan, and the guy got super close and whispered, "See, Peter Pan has brown eyes." Hands down, he's the best Disney employee I've ever met. He was also Pluto. And I watched Jack Sparrow talking to a kid when the kid started vomiting everywhere. Jack said, "Too much of the old apple juice, eh?" Been there myself. Even ran out once. All the while, the kid is just projectile vomiting everywhere. Story 15. I did the college program at Walt Disney World, and I never saw a character break character while I worked audience control for parades. But I did see a few fully costumed characters vomit in their heads, and once Prince Naveen got heat exhaustion and managed to leave the parade route while still in character. He was almost completely passed out when we found him in the back after the parade. Typically, if a character actor is in distress, the parade will just speed up to double time. Story 16. I recently saw a video on YouTube of Ray Skywalker talking to a little girl and her dad had just started filming. Apparently, the story the little girl was telling got Ray laughing so hard that she had to turn her face away and eventually got up and ran away because she couldn't stop laughing at whatever the little girl's story was. In the YouTube comments, it is explained what she said. "My daughter busted me out for giving her too many donuts and told Ray she threw up, then persisted to share how she can potty by herself. Right after sharing secrets of the Force, complete 180 in the conversation." That's kids for you. Super adorable. Whoa, that girl made Ray laugh more than Kylo Ren made her cry. The First Order needs to take notes on this one if they want to defeat the Resistance. Story 17. Once at Disneyland, the sheriff of Nottingham was jokingly frightening a child. He reached out to touch the child's balloon, but it popped. The character actor was clearly surprised. A new balloon appeared less than 30 seconds later. Robin Hood delivered the second balloon, of course. And back when I was a child, we were at Disneyland Paris and had just gotten a baby Simba plush. I brought it to dinner at one of the character meeting restaurants, where the characters came to your table. Most of the characters pretended to coo and tickle Simba, but the sheriff of Nottingham kidnapped him. I got him back, of course, but it took a dramatic, fake tug-of-war between Mr. Incredible and the sheriff of Nottingham. Seriously, these guys were good. Story 18. I wasn't a character, but I worked closely with them as a photographer. Disney performers are trained to never break character, no matter what. They have ways of signaling to their attendants that they're in distress, and it's up to the attendants to avoid any awkward or uncomfortable situations. As for weird situations, performers do get stalked by fans in the park. Some people get in line multiple times to get a photo with the same performer. The extreme side of Disney fandom can be a bit strange. I heard about one performer who had to get a restraining order against a fan who got a full back tattoo of her, out of character. And Snow White with blue eyes had a very loyal fan who flipped out when she changed her schedule and another employee played her. He tried to hurt the other employee because she didn't have blue eyes and he didn't think she was the real Snow White. He was banned from the park. It's weird because the real Snow White has brown eyes. Story 19. I auditioned to be a face character at Disneyland, and I made it to the stage where they simulate scenarios with unruly guests, dealing with rude comments, and you have to respond in character. My dance teacher used to be a face character over 20 years ago, and she had all sorts of tales about people behaving inappropriately. She primarily portrayed Pocahontas. Looking back, I'm actually glad I didn't make it through. Back then, the pay was barely above minimum wage, which was around $6.75 an hour or something like that. I shared this with my aunt, and she mentioned that in 1996, her parents confronted a teenager who was acting inappropriately toward Pocahontas while she was leaning over to take pictures with my aunt's little sister. When he left, my aunt's mom said, "I know you can't yell at him, but we sure as heck can." Pocahontas just smiled and continued taking pictures with the kids, but my aunt could tell by the look in her eyes that she appreciated it. My aunt told me that Pocahontas might have been my dance teacher. Story 20. I worked at the Disney store in Orange County, California in late 1987 and early 1988. I think at the time it was one of only a few stores open. The back of the store had a big screen where we constantly played Disney videos. Every once in a while, a very muscular black gay man would come in and kindly request that we play anything Pooh related. He would then proceed to dance around the store. He came in the evenings toward closing and sing the Tigger parts of either dialogue or any song. Turns out he was one of the Tiggers at Disneyland. The dude just loved being Tigger. The people who play characters at Disney are very into it. If something comes up that needs to be addressed, they will handle it in character. You've probably heard stories about characters helping kids find their parents. These days, characters always have handlers nearby with walkie-talkies. Story 21. When I was a child, I went to Walt Disney World with my mom, aunt, and cousins. I really wanted Captain Hook's autograph, but he wasn't supposed to give them out because he was in character. I started crying, and my mom went back to talk to him again. I hope she was nice about it, and told him I was very upset. Even though he wasn't supposed to, he signed my book, and I've always thought that was really nice of him. So to Captain Hook from 1989 or so, if you're out there, thank you. I hope you didn't get in trouble for that. Captain Hook got off easy. If this was canon, Peter Pan would have used that opportunity to tie him and serve him up as crocodile chow. If you like these stories, you wouldn't want to miss What's the Quickest Way You Noped Out of a Job. Story 3 was crazy. See you there.